Yo, 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 what's up, everyone? It's your boy Grizz. I'm here with my boy Sleep for another episode of Thrash Talk. We're stoked to bring you a new one today. It's just going to be the two of us, just thrashing it out, hashing it out, having a good time, talking about a lot of just normal life stuff. We're going to touch on all kinds of good stuff. Last week, we dropped our episode 8 with Noah Elliott. So if you get a chance, please go check that out. That is a sick one and really worth the watch. Go check them all out. They're all great. Sleep, what do you think, bud?
Yeah, man. Last week was great. Noah is an extremely inspirational individual. And, you know, there's a lot that I took away from that and that I'm going to use in my everyday life. And I think that anybody could. It's been an awesome year so far at Thrash Talk. We're almost at our 10th episode. I actually don't even know how many episodes we've done so far. We filmed a bunch. There's a bunch already out there in the world. It's been a blast, man. There's nobody I'd rather do it with than you. Epic times.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. It's been fun. You know, it's kind of crazy. I was explaining this to someone the other night. I was over at my jiu-jitsu coach's house watching the last UFC, and one of my buddies was like, dude, I'm loving the podcast. You're crushing it. That Sleep guy, he's crushing it. He's like, you guys have a really cool dynamic. And I was like, you know, it's kind of funny because I've actually never met Sleep in person. He's like, what? And I was like, yeah, I've known him for about a year now, maybe a little less. And, you know, we've done a bunch of like Twitter spaces together and realized, you know, hey, we vibe pretty well. But we've never met in person. But I feel like I know you really well, even though like, we've never sat down face to face and grabbed a coffee or anything like that.
This world is wild that we live in now. You know, this is different than we grew up. It was, you didn't have friends over long distances, you know, via some social platform. You know, we didn't grow up that way. And when it actually started, when you could do that, I think I'm thinking of like MySpace days. I'm thinking of early Facebook days when I was in the military at the time. And then you didn't even want to be friends with people from far. You were like, ooh, hey, is that a man posing to be a girl? Like, it was really odd. I remember the old chat room days, even, you know, back when Napster and Livewire were coming. Livewire, where we were downloading our music from the internet, man. It was fun. But now we're in this space where we can do this. The Shredding Sassy Social Club has brought us together and brings groups of geographically dispersed individuals all kind of chasing that same dream, chasing that same love together. And it's really cool that we are able to kind of do this and bring these high level athletes and these high level thoughts out and distribute them to the social club and the whole world, man. This podcast has been great.
Yeah, it's been really fun. And not only getting to have these cool conversations with, you know, legends within their own right and all that kind of stuff, but getting to know you. I mean, back to your point, I didn't get a computer until probably about 6th grade, something like that. Maybe, no, it's longer than that. It must have been like closer to 8th grade. But AOL chat was like the chat room that I would go into. And my dad, you know, is dial up. So you had the crazy sounds when you'd be logging in, and my dad would pick up the phone to make a call and it'd just disconnect me. I'm like, Dad, get off the phone. And he's like, get off the computer, you know? But I had like an hour limit, you know, a few times a week that I was allowed to do it. And it was so funny because like I really just was looking to connect with other people out there in the world. And it was so new. We had a computer class that actually taught DOS originally. And now looking back at it, I'm like, wow, DOS was the first, you know, that was the first form of internet, anything, and computer programming and all of that. And how cool to learn a little bit about code in like 6th, 7th grade, 8th grade, that kind of stuff. But the AOL chats and then MySpace came out, and I was like, I had a girlfriend who was into it at the time, and I was like, what do you do? Oh, I better make one too. And you could like fully customize your space, whatever, you know, and I don't even know what MySpace, if it even still exists, but just so funny how it's turned into what it is. And you can literally connect with anyone, anytime, anywhere in the world at a moment's notice. And technology is awesome because it's really made the world a very small place. You know, when I'm on the road, I FaceTime my family, and that is such a nice little piece of the equation for me, because you do get lonely, you do spend some time on the road, you do miss things, and that's probably one of the coolest things to me. Social media and all that, I don't really love it. So being able to FaceTime my family, though, is probably the best aspect of technology for me.
Yeah, I want to reach back real quick and then come back to the family and FaceTiming, because I do travel a lot for work as well, and I experienced those things as well. But reaching back, I forgot about AOL, and we also had this thing that was called ICQ. Did you ever use ICQ back in the day?
No,
it was another kind of chat thing where it had like this symbol. When you'd get a message, it would be like, uh-oh. It would give you a message. But I remember that, like, I was in 7th grade. We had like the giant ass computer in our like family living room, and I'd be on it kind of, chatting with my friends, and same thing. Mom would be on the phone, get off the internet, all that stuff. But I remember there was this girl I was dating. It was my first girlfriend. Her name was Nikki. Sorry, Nikki. I probably shouldn't have just doxed your name on the live on the air. We're not live. Don't worry about it. Maybe we can edit that. So Nikki, we were 7th grade or something, and Nikki was, she just wasn't impressed with me, I guess. We had dated for like a week, and now she's ready to move on. And I remember she like called me an asswipe or something like that on ICQ. And my mom was over my shoulder, and she was not pleased. My mom was not pleased with that comment. And Nikki wasn't allowed around much anymore. But no, Nikki's great. Nikki, I love you. You're amazing. But I do miss those days. That was a fun time for sure. And, it was kind of the leading edge of where we're at today with all this technology. It's so cool.
Yeah. And I mean, dude, how like we were all just enthralled with that option of being able to connect with people, I think. And I think that's what the human element kind of is. I think we all just want connection. And, some people have only an online presence. Some people only have, an in real life IRL presence. And then, people like you and me, like we kind of have to walk this line of both. And it just comes down to connection, though. And it's funny how the human animal, if you will, really craves that. It's that community aspect as a whole. It's feeling needed and wanted, but also finding your place and then offering something up as well. I do like that mix of it. But dude, when we start looking at social media and all of the instant gratification and swiping, dating apps, all of that kind of stuff, I'm just like, I don't know if I'm just getting old or if it's like one of those things that I just can't quite wrap my head around. But, with my kid, it's like, I definitely don't want him on TikTok anytime in the near future. I definitely don't want him on Instagram. And I have to be careful when I'm swiping through things, because all kinds of stuff comes up on my Instagram feed, everything from like gnarly crashes to sick snowboard and ski videos to, something that a friend posted, podcasts. It might have some colorful language, something like that.
Sure.
But I'm always, I really, as he's getting a little bit older now, I have to be super careful about like when I'm on there, how much time I'm spending in front of a screen, because we don't let him have a whole lot of screen time. And then like where he's at in the room, I might just the other night, we were at an Airbnb and he was kind of running around doing his own thing. It was cool. I was kind of just checking in on some social media stuff. And I happened to go into my feed, and of course, crazy videos are popping up, and there was a rock slide that smoked a truck, like full on just smoked like a semi truck. And he happened to be looking over my shoulder right as that rock came down and just blasted that truck. And he's like, whoa, what was that, Dada? And so like, obviously, I had to explain to him natural disasters and all this kind of stuff, and wrong place at the wrong time and all of that. And luckily, nobody was hurt. I think it was on Nature is Metal, that page. And it was pretty wild video. But I had to explain it all to him, and he's like, why did it come down? And I was like, any number of reasons. We had a full conversation, but then he wanted to watch it multiple times. And then of course, at some point in the middle of the night, he woke up and was referencing that video. And I'm like, damn it. Like, such a simple little mistake makes such an impact on these kids. And you know, you've got 6-year-olds all the way up to, you know, our age and older that are on social media. And so I just don't know how good it is for society as a whole. I mean, what's your thought?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And looking at even us, right? You know, I think that both of us are, you know, we don't put too much weight into social media. However, we do a podcast. We have to put a little bit in, right? And when you had that video hit 70,000 views a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. I was loving it, right? I got that dopamine rush that others get from this. You know, I've never been a part of something that has gotten 70,000 views. I mean, that's just spectacular. So we are victims of it as well. Even though I see myself, hey, I'm an adult, I can handle myself. I still kind of get that. Wow, look at all these notifications. Wow, look at all these likes. Oh man, why didn't that video? That was our best video yet. How come that didn't get as much love as the other ones? And then you're kind of bummed about it. So I get it. And for me as a 37-year-old, I might be 38 now. I'm not even really sure. Me as a grown ass man, for me to feel that way, you know, I know that the kids feel it like crazy. My daughter's 12 years old. She doesn't have TikTok. She doesn't have Instagram. She doesn't have Facebook or any of these other social medias. However, she does have a browser on her phone. She accesses them, and she doesn't have accounts, but you know, her friends send her Instagram videos. They send her TikTok videos. She watches them. She can scroll. We're definitely mindful of it, and finding that balance of, I don't want you to be a total outsider with your friend group, and being able to raise you right is something that is challenging and that we're trying to do. You know, where, you know, if she makes a mistake with something and we need to punish her, you know, do we take away everything? How long do we take it away for? You know, is this going to affect her friendships, her ability to kind of grow? And I've heard it before. You know, I used to think to myself as we were raising my daughter initially, before my son was born, man, this is the hardest time to raise a kid with all of this technology. You know, and then I had somebody tell me, or I heard on a podcast, you know, every generation is the hardest generation to raise a kid, whether it was back in the 1800s where you had to worry about rattlesnake bites and crossing the plains to get to the West Coast, or now, you know, the digital frontier, one would say. It's very interesting. And again, we're blazing trails here and being mindful of what these kids need, and that each kid needs something different. They're not all the same.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny because I think it's also like the hardest time to be an adult. You know, it might be the hardest time to raise a kid, but it's also like when we were kids, we could have never imagined this. And when our grandparents were kids, they didn't even have TV. You know, at least mine didn't. It was, they had a radio and the telephone was booming, and that was a wired thing that was connected to the wall, you know? And so it's funny, the comparisons of raising a kid, but also being adult, and who knows what our kids are going to see in the future. So, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, like, I definitely applaud you guys for limiting her access to the social media stuff, but also trying to find that balance of keeping her engaged with it in a sense of not falling behind, because at the end of the day, technology is the way of the future, and who knows what the next 10 years will look like, the next 20 years. My wife and I have this conversation rather frequently about technology with our kiddo, because it is kind of a necessary skill for them to be able to move forward in the future. And so, you know, my little guy, he's not even 5 yet, but it's wild to see. I mean, well, okay. So it's wild to see like how much he gravitates towards screens just automatically. And then also to see him, we'll let him take the phone and take pictures and that kind of stuff. And he has an actual digital camera made for children, which is super cool because he loves taking pictures and videos and stuff. But at like 2 and 3 years old, he already knew how to operate a phone to access the camera, to snap photos. And granted, most of them weren't great, but he like something in his brain clicked to where he could automatically use this stuff. And so it's one of those things where you're like, okay, like, aha, like it is necessary. And kids humans are kind of naturally in tune to being able to pick this stuff up super quick. Where we find a big issue with screens and stuff. We were just at my parents' house, and they've got some health issues and stuff like that, and so we were out there helping them. And my dad, someone who isn't very mobile anymore and that sort of stuff, he kind of just sits there and watches TV all day and then scrolls on his iPad. I think he just plays Bejeweled or something, but TV was on the whole time. And at our house, like, we have a TV, but it's primarily, we play podcasts on there. We play music a lot of the time. And then once in a while, we'll give my boys some screen time and stuff like that. And he was so enthralled with grandpa having the TV on the whole time and asking for movies and videos and shows and all this other stuff. We saw this crazy twist in his attitude after just 2 days of almost limitless exposure. And we're like, okay, we're at least on the right path with our kid, who is super energetic, who needs to be outside, who needs to play, let this energy out. We were like, okay, you're getting a detox when we get home. You're not getting screen time for a couple of days. And we have some educational stuff on a portable DVD player, like educational DVDs, that we're like, if you're going to get screen time, that's what you're getting. Otherwise, it's books and it's play. We're going to do arts and crafts, all the other stuff, but no screens are really getting turned on. And it also was kind of a struggle for me, because Heather's like, that also means you, Dad, you got to limit your Instagram and all this other stuff. But it's wild to see how fast the attitude changes with my son when he's just staring at a screen the whole time, day in and day out. And granted, he's running around the house and playing with toys and all this other stuff, but it's constantly on. It's constantly background noise. We don't always have that in our house. We like it quiet sometimes. We like having the door open and letting him just run in and inside and out without an added distraction in the background. So it's just really interesting how it can really affect a kid's mood, a kid's attitude, a kid's attention to what you're trying to, explain to them or get them to do or correct them on. Again, yeah. I don't know.
No, you brought up some really great points, and I see it as well. I guarantee you everybody sees it, right? In the car, I can think, my son's like, hey, can I watch a show? We're on the way back from hockey. I'm on a call or something like that. I have a couple different phones, one for work and one for my personal. So, I'll throw him back my personal phone if I'm on a work call, and, we'll put on Blippy or something, not Blippy, whatever, a YouTube show. But then when I get home, when I try to get that away, even if I am very clear that, hey, after this 30-minute car ride home, this is coming back with Dad and we're done. And I need you to understand that right now, son. I need you to understand that this is coming back to me. My son is also 6, or, just about the same age as your son. When we get home, it's still a battle. It's still a battle for one more second. Come on, holding it away from me. And it's still a battle. And, like you said, it's as soon as that happens, that kind of attitude adjustment kind of shifts. And we are a little bit more liberal than you guys are. And I applaud you for being that way. It's a challenge, especially, with working families, right? My wife works. My wife actually just completed her master's at the same time. So she was doing a lot of schoolwork on the nights and the weekends. She was, working her job. I have my job. I have this podcast with you. I have, the Shredding Sassy kind of volunteer thing that we're doing. We are with our kids all the time, and we love it. And I do know that I am a good father, but at times I need to be like, okay, hey, I need to handle this right now. Go do your thing. And sometimes that's, hey, go watch a show while I finish what I'm doing, and then we'll re-engage. So, man, it's tough. It's tough to not do that, right? So if I don't do that and he's in my face, it's hard to do both. And I actually kind of sound guilty. I feel guilty about saying that. I feel like maybe that is kind of like a bad father move. It's just like, hey, just, shut up and go watch this movie. That is not at all what I'm saying. But in a sense, sometimes it kind of is, because I'm like, gosh, let me just finish this report or just finish prepping for this podcast or something like that, where I just need you to kind of move away. So, it hurts for sure.
Well, I think I get what you're saying. I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing or the I don't think, oh, you're, just shut up and stare at this. I don't see that. I see you utilizing your screens as a tool at times, right? And it's kind of what I think they're meant to be anyway. And we've had to do that. My wife and I, when we're both in, say, a meeting together on, say, Zoom or something like that, and our kid is home, we need him to be distracted so that we can have the conversation that needs to be had, whatever that is, without him coming in and jumping up there and being like, hi, and taking over the conversation. We're like, he sees people on screens that we're interacting with, and he's like, I want to interact too. He's a social butterfly. So I get it, man. And it's a fine balance. And it's tough. It is the way of the world. It's not only the way of the world, but it's also like, he sees other kids that have that, and he's like, how come I can't? And I'm like, dude, same reason that kid can't ride a bike down like a top level pump track. It's just, it's what you do versus what they do. And it's not necessarily what mom and dad want for you. So it's always a tough conversation. And, I know you pretty well. So I have a feeling like I can assume kind of how your two kids are very different in some aspects. I think my son is probably a little bit more like your daughter in the sense of like, he's very active. He's very sports oriented and that sort of stuff. What about your son? Like, tell me a little bit more about the differences between, your daughter who's 12 and your son who's 6, and their personalities and style choices, I guess.
Yeah, great point. All these kids are different. And, my daughter, who is go, she's very athletic. The school that she goes to is a really large school. We live in a big area here in Dallas. And I mean, for reference, I think 160 girls tried out for the volleyball team. And she made it, right? She made the volleyball team, and then she made the basketball team, and then she made the track team. And I do expect her to make the soccer team. So very athletic, very, very, very on the go. Where my son is more, he is athletic, but he doesn't have that mindset that I just want to go. I want to win. I want to destroy. He's more passive. So he is only 6. However, I've seen him kind of develop in a way that, he's just not as interested. When he was playing soccer for a few seasons, man, he was going as hard as he could. I could see him running around, having a blast out there. And then it kind of faded off where, he was just kind of going through the motions. He plays hockey as well. Hockey, the same thing. Every couple games, he'll try really hard and it's really impressive. And then other games, the puck will kind of squeak by him and he kind of watches it and then just kind of goes through the motions. We saw the same in basketball as well. As a dad who is very athletic myself, or likes to, do those athletic things, it's really tough to see potential in your child, but not that mindset to want to do it. He doesn't have that mindset. One mistake I made is I told him one day, and this actually kind of makes me sad. Don't worry, buddy. We'll find your thing. Kid's only 6. And he's like, repeated it back to me. So.
Did your dad ever say something like that to you?
No, I don't think so, because I was all over the place anyway. I come from a smaller town. It was a lot easier. I wasn't the top athlete by any means, but I definitely had a really good work ethic. So I was able to make the teams. I was able to play hard. My dad was actually a pro golfer. He not a like a tour pro. He was a club pro. Golfed in college. Went and was at a club pro at a couple courses. So growing up, he had me golfing from as early as I can remember to probably about middle school. And And it was tough, right? I was still doing hockey and soccer and basketball and all the other sports at the same time. But golf was kind of, what probably he was most serious about. And golf being a very technical sport, there's a lot of mistakes you can make, even minor ones that affect how you play. And by middle school, I hated golf. I hated golf. So by junior high, I hated golf, and I quit. I didn't go further than that in golf. So yeah, it was definitely I had a great childhood. I had a great father, great mother. They were divorced when I was really young, but they worked really well together. So that was good. But I was never kind of experiencing what my son is experiencing. And again, this is all his own choice, and it's just something that I'm not used to.
Right.
But yeah, just different for sure.
I wonder if that comment, don't worry, bud, we'll find your thing, was almost, I'm sure it just kind of came out, right? And I almost wonder if it was something that you were trying to reassure yourself more than him. It can be frustrating when you really want something for your kiddo and they just have no desire for it.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think, and the fact of being a parent, though, is these kids are so receptive, and they're in tune with what's actually going on. They may not seem like it. They might just be like, bam, 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 or whatever, or just fully zoned in on, an art project or something like that. But they're really in tune with everything that's going on and super receptive and very observant. And that's a tough thing when you're trying to help them figure it out and you just don't know, and they don't necessarily know, or at least don't know how to communicate it to you yet.
Yeah. It's interesting. And there's lots of, again, he's 6 years old. There's lots of time, but I can see that it's different. He's a little different. The kids are a little bit different than him in this sense. And, I do see a lot of parents who are not as engaged with their children. That's not the right way to say it, but can kind of let their children do whatever they want. And again, reaching back to technology, that is something that I don't think is great in this world, right? Your kid plays baseball one season and then he wants to take a season off, and every day he comes home after school and watches TV all day, and then he just plays video games in his house. I do think it is important to keep your kid consistently engaged actively in at least one sport, or one at, maybe it's martial arts, maybe it's coding camp, whatever it is, keeping your kid, maybe it's cooking, keeping your kid actively engaged in something to grow, and not letting them, don't over push them. Maybe it's just a rec league or a house league or something like that. Don't push them. But I think, until they're 10, 11, 12, I think that there is something your kid should be consistently doing, right? Again, maybe it's BMX, maybe it's baseball. Maybe they want to do baseball in the spring, and in the winter they do basketball, and in the fall they do hockey, and then they rotate every year, and they do that every year. As long as you're consistent. I do see too many parents that are just like, yeah, well, whatever you want to do. I guess if you don't want to do anything this season, we won't do anything. And then that just kind of compounds. And then the next season, they don't do anything. And then the next season, they may tell you a little late that they want to do something, but then it's too late. And it's tough. So I do not think that's the move. I think, obviously you want to let your kids select what they want to do. They should do what they love, right? You shouldn't force anything on them. However, you shouldn't let them just quit. You shouldn't always let them quit, I guess is kind of where I was going with that.
Yeah, 100%. And so there's a few things that kind of sparked my brain when you were talking about that. First of all, my kid seems like he's the most active human on the planet. And so one minute he'll be jumping on the trampoline. The next he's like, I want my bike. And I'm like, well, you can't jump on the trampoline with your bike. He's like, no, I want to ride it. And I'm like, okay, cool. He's riding his bike. And before you know it, he's like wandering into the neighbor's garage or something like that, looking at their kids' toys. So it's like, we're constantly dealing with this kid that, is super active, but also just wants to do it all. So very different, I think, than your little guy in that regard. But I think it's like what you said is like, it's really important to expose them to things and let them have the option, but also don't let them quit. And that's something that my dad did for me. I went and lived with my dad when I was 12, and he started exposing me to all kinds of sports. and instantly fell in love with skiing. That was like my thing, like being outside, outdoors in the mountains, learning how to do it, figuring it out season after season. But he also had me play football. He had me play basketball, and I was terrible at basketball. I was like 4 foot nothing, had no jump shot, had no jump, was kind of slow at the end of the day, and like was just terrible at it. But there were multiple times where I wanted to quit, and he was like, here's the deal. You can't quit. You have to see the season through. And while he exposed me to all these different sports, he also saw me thrive in some of them. I thrived in football. I thrived in wrestling. I thrived in tennis. I thrived in skiing and snowboarding. And he was like, you want to play a sport? You're going to have an art also. Like, you don't have a choice. Pick an art. I don't care what it is. You can do anything, pottery, music, whatever. And I had started band in 5th grade in Oregon that's where I started my life, I guess, as Oregon. And so I was already into music and that sort of stuff. And he was like, the deal is, though, you quit the art, you have to quit all sports. I don't care what sport you're in the middle of the season. Like, that is the one thing that would stop you halfway through a season of anything, is you quit the art, you quit the sport. And so that actually, I think it helped me in a lot of ways. Music is this great tool to expand the mind. You're essentially learning a whole nother language. It's all math. It's the universal language that everybody can get in tune together, regardless if you speak the same language. And so his big thing was like, you're going to do the art regardless. You quit the art, you have to quit sports. And that was big for me because I was also very similar to my son, very energetic, very into a lot of different things athletically. And, it gave me a drive to push hard in both. And I've always been competitive. So like in music, like if you're in a symphony or jazz band or marching band or anything, there's kind of a ranking system, and you first chair through whatever, 10th chair. And based on those rankings, you get different parts. And so I always wanted first chair because I wanted that lead role. I wanted to perform. I wanted to stand out. But I also saw kids in there that were very talented musicians that weren't necessarily competitive, didn't necessarily want to stand out, wanted to just be a part of the hodgepodge that is a form, a band or a symphony or something like that. And so I always thought music was a great one because you could stand out if you wanted to, but you didn't have to if you didn't want to. And TV was definitely an option in my house. It was never something that wasn't available or wanted to do. Video games, I never had the latest and greatest video game console. It was like, I was getting a PlayStation 1 by the time Xbox was coming out and that sort of stuff. So like, it was definitely different in that regard. But I'll say this, and my last point on this whole thing is it really taught me to think in two different directions, be goal-oriented, and forced me to really try at everything, because I knew if I gave one up, I had to give the other up. And I actually really enjoyed it. And I was this weird jock that walked between, the band geeks, so to say. It was weird. I was one of two guys that played sports in there, and the rest of them were all artsy kids. And I wanted to suggest a book. Jocko Willink has this book series called The Way of the Warrior Kid. And we're listening to it on audiobook with our son right now. And, I think it's geared towards, 6 and up, a little bit older, but it's a great little book series. So anybody out there listening or watching this podcast, if you're kind of experiencing raising children, I think it's a great one for kids of all age. Because my kid is like, yesterday he asked me to put up the pull-up bar because the kid in the book can't do pull-ups, and it's like one of those big exercises that is a struggle for him, and he's conquering this thing that makes him stand out in a bad way in front of his classmates. And my son's like, Dad, can I work out? Can I do some pull-ups? Will you put the bar up? I'm like, sure, man. So it's just I like that book series. I like it a lot. Talks about bullying and all this stuff and how to be a leader. So
absolutely, that's a great book series. I have I don't remember what they're called. I have two of them. I have the yellow one and the red one, and I made it through both of those with my daughter. And like, good point. It might be about that time that I can start going through those books with my son as well. Jocko's the man. He's just such an inspiration, such a good dude. And looking at you and seeing those kids in band that probably could have been the best, had the skill to be the best if they wanted to, they just didn't have the drive. You see that everywhere. You see that a lot in MMA and in jiu-jitsu and other things where, these guys that are these super athletes that have the capability, but they don't have the drive to eat healthy all the time or to hit the gym every day, are beaten by maybe these less skilled people that just have more passion, more energy, more drive. So it's interesting. I wanted to ask, back in that time when your dad told you that you needed to do an art to continue to play competitive sports, to be in sports, which I think is an awesome thing. I think that's really cool. I understand that you had been in band before, but what was your reaction like at that time? Was it a reaction that was like, oh, okay, whatever, I've done it before, I'll do it again, sure, whatever? Or was it more like, oh, bummer, this is just going to be, waste of time? And then you kind of found your way to love it again.
Yeah, that's a great question. I loved music. I had a pretty traumatic childhood prior to going and living with him. And granted, it wasn't all good living with him either. But one of the things he started doing is I was having like night terrors and nightmares and all this stuff. And so he would put symphonies on at night and play them for me while I was sleeping. And so I was always kind of surrounded by that style of music. I grew up listening to gangster rap and hip hop. My first album, my first tape, and this is how old I am. My first tape was The Chronic. Dr. Dre's The Chronic, 91 or 92 or something like that. I can't remember, but so that's what I listened to up until going and living with my dad. And he's like, no, you're not listening to this anymore. And so I'd have to sneak it and stuff. But I was also enthralled by symphonic music and orchestras and all of that. And I have a funny ear where I can kind of pick out just about any instrument and be like, that's a cello, that's a tuba, that's a French horn, that's, oboe or bassoon or whatever. So I've always enjoyed it anyway. Where that conversation really came in, because he's like, you're definitely doing music, or you're definitely doing your art. It sounds like it's music, blah, 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 sign you up for the classes. There was a point where I kind of didn't want to do it anymore. And I was like, I'm just kind of sick of it. And he was like, cool, no sports then, and that's where that conversation really came in. I was like, okay, I got to figure out a way to like reimagine this a little bit. Where can I enjoy it? Because honestly, I was first chair most of the time because I was so competitive. And at some level, like, yeah, you get to learn new songs throughout the year and you get to perform them and all that kind of stuff. It kind of became boring for me, to be honest. And not to say I'm like this amazing musician, but it just kind of became like you're going through the motions. And so what I actually did at that point was I started to learn other instruments. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm a woodwind instrument. I was a clarinetist. You couldn't have a clarinets aren't in jazz band. And I wanted to do jazz band. That looked like super fun. Those guys were always playing rad songs and stuff like that. And so since I already knew the clarinet, a woodwind instrument, the embouchure of your mouth is very similar to a saxophone. I was like, I'm going to learn the sax because that's in jazz band and I want to do some jazz band stuff. So I started learning different jazz band instruments, essentially different saxophones, fell in love with the Barry sax. That's just a sexy instrument all the way around. But we had a couple Barry sax players already. And so I was like, I really want to play the bass line, go back to clarinet and play the bass line. I was like, wait, there's a thing called a bass clarinet. That's the same riff. And I already know how to play the clarinet. And it's essentially the same instrument, just a couple octaves lower. And you get to play a totally different part. And so I bounced around and did that sort of thing in band and just tried it out. And my ultimate love was percussion, but my dad was like, no way, you going to have a drum set in this house kind of thing. And that sort of thing. So I had to learn to play the drums behind his back, signed up for beginning drum class, which in my high school was only for the bagpipe corps, and then excelled in that. And so I think that conversation with him really sparked the interest of like, okay, I have to do this. I don't really have a choice in the matter because I still want to play sports. How can I get this to fit my needs a little bit? How can I get this to tick the box for my dad and then also like enjoy it, because I have to do it no matter what. And by switching instruments and trying different parts and different sounds and doing different styles of bands, all of a sudden, like, I was like, oh, this is sick. I can totally do this. I was in marching band too, which is absurdly hot in the summertime. And you're kind of a goofball wearing those big froofy hats and the uniforms and stuff. So sure. I don't know. It was a conversation for sure. And he wasn't all about me joining the bagpipe corps or signing up for that beginning drum class. And it was really just to learn the drums. But my dad's old school and was like, no son of mine's going to wear a skirt. And so I was like, okay. And I forged his signature and started taking the class behind his back, and then became a kilted drummer in the same year. But yeah, I mean, I credit him to getting me to kind of think outside the box a bit.
Where did your wife grow up? And I asked that question, with your son growing up in Aspen, that is just, it's a different world to me than what I grew up with. Small town Pennsylvania, what my kids are growing up with in Texas, and some in Northern California when I lived there, because I didn't live in a mountain town. I lived an hour and 15 away from Tahoe, closer to Sacramento. But growing up in a mountain town, I feel like your son probably has some benefits, or a lot of benefits that the kids in other areas don't have. But then also there are some limitations, I would assume, on some of the other parts of childhood that he's missing out. Did your wife kind of experience something similar, or are we like blazing a trail with him?
No. So my wife grew up in Washington State and kind of the Olympia area. So I would say, yes, we're blazing a trail with him, but no, because she grew up very different than I did. She was a career gymnast, very talented at a very young age, national champion and all this other stuff multiple time over. And, so she was homeschooled and she was a career gymnast. She trained 8 to 10 hours a day and then fit school in when and where she could. So she grew up in a much different household and just a different mindset altogether. So it's kind of interesting because where we live right now is definitely a bubble. And I don't know, like, there's definitely a solid core group of people here that we relate to, but there's also people who live here who just kind of live in this other world. And can't say I can't relate to them, because ski and snowboard industry is made up of all types of people, but it is kind of the richer person sport, similar to golf or something like that. And because I'm so deep in that world, I feel like I can relate to everybody, but it is definitely a different place. There is a lot. It's very expensive. First of all, it's absurdly expensive for land or just even groceries. But where we see the opportunity and where the payoff is there's a lot of opportunity for our kiddo. There's a lot of free or very cheap programs. We have a hockey program just down valley that is free to learn, for kids to learn how to ice skate and play hockey. And then obviously if you advance through all of that and want to be a part of the team, I'm sure there's some fees there, but they provide you with all the equipment, the ice time, all of that stuff. We have free bike park where my kid can just ride and thrive. Skiing and snowboarding is free for the kids until they're 6. So they get a free season pass. We have a great jiu-jitsu and MMA gym right here in town that my kid absolutely loves. And he, jiu-jitsu is pretty inexpensive for a kid his age. So there is benefit to living here, but it's also a very strange place because it is a very wealthy place. And with that comes families who don't have time for their kids. You know, their children are being raised by au pairs and nannies and all of this other stuff. And so you definitely see it with their attitude and mindset and this almost sense of entitlement, like this should be mine, this is mine, you know. And kids play at the park and everyone comes from a different walk of life, but you watch how the kids interact with each other, and it's very, very different. You know, that sense of entitlement kind of drives me up the wall. Like,
sure,
it kills me, man. And it's one of those things where I'm like, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but this is what I'm thinking.
No, I kind of forget. I kind of forget my question, but so what's the schooling system like there? You know, is it mainly private school? How is the public school? Do you guys intend to put JP in public school or private school? How is that going to work? Because you guys are coming up close. Is it next year, or maybe you still have 2 years before that time comes?
I mean, so we have all kinds of school options here. Definitely a lot of private schools. There's also a public school system all the way down valley. We call it Glenwood Springs down valley. We live technically down valley, but also up valley. We're like, just outside of Aspen. So we're technically down valley from Aspen, but everything else is down valley from us. But there are public schools all the way through the valley. And then there's specialty private schools that are outdoor education based. We have Montessori schools. We have, Christian/Catholic schools, that sort of stuff. So there's quite the hodgepodge of schools here. You know, I don't know if we're going to put our son in the public school system. I'm a product of public school system, and not great ones, to be honest. You know, my high school was awesome in Utah, but prior to that, we were low income. I was a troublemaker. I grew up in the hood, if you will, in Oregon, if you could imagine that. But I am not a big fan of it. I'm not a fan of the food source, the curriculum. I'm not a fan of teachers pressing their own personal views. I think personally, and my wife isn't either. My wife was homeschooled. I was public school. So we have a unique perspective of both. You know, there's a lot, in my opinion, that's wrong with the school system. And so we're toying around with the idea of private, or either private or homeschool. I mean, he's in a private school right now. But that's primarily, it's definitely education based, but it's primarily, it's still daycare, it's still preschool, it's that sort of thing. You know, they're learning math and spelling and reading and all of the other stuff, but it's very small class size. He was in a class that was 20 to 1 teacher kid ratio, and the class size I think was actually 30 kids, so they had to have a second teacher in there, and all he'd do is stand by the door all day. He wants to be outside. They're like, come sit down and read, and he's like, you read, I want to go outside, can we do it outside? And plus they give him candy and all this other stuff, and he's got a bunch of food allergies. So we're leaning towards homeschooling, to be honest.
Cool.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think you can definitely educate your child on the facts of everything, and the curriculums out there are awesome for what, they kind of teach you to teach your kid. It's a tough question, honestly, but at the same time, like, we want him to be able to explore and live life. I don't know, around kids that have same interests, that don't necessarily may come from money, but don't necessarily have that sense of entitlement.
Yeah, you guys travel a lot. You guys travel a lot too, so being able to keep up with schooling while on the road, you guys are living an interesting life for sure, man. That's pretty cool. That's pretty darn cool.
Yeah. And are your kids public, or your daughter's definitely public school, right?
Yeah. They're both public. My son is in kindergarten this year. My daughter is in 7th grade. It's good, man. It is really good where we're at. I think that they're in a pretty high level school district. It's nice that I don't have to pay for it, so that's pretty good. And again, they do well. one thing that we're starting to run into an issue with my daughter, and I think that a lot of people probably do run into this. Keep in mind, my daughter is very athletic. She's very smart. Sometimes effort is an issue, but not a lot. Sometimes effort is an issue, but not a lot. We're starting to run into some things with her where she's actually home right now, so hopefully she can't hear me talking. We got the victim's mentality coming through a little bit where, well, the teacher didn't tell me we had a test that day. Well, Becky at soccer should have passed it me, and she didn't pass it to me, and I was wide open. I was wide open that whole time. I would have went down and scored, but Becky didn't pass it to me. Or you didn't tell me I had to do this, or you didn't tell me I had to put this away, or something like that. So very, very blaming of others instead of taking ownership on herself. And it's very interesting because I think that at this time in her life, I would say that a lot of kids probably experience that, and a lot of kids probably act that way. And as a parent, we're talking a lot of parenting today. I love it. As a parent, how do we instill, ownership, accountability, responsibility in a way that we're understanding their points of view, not pushing ours too hard, but getting them to kind of see the value in accountability, right? So it's definitely something we're working through for sure.
That's such a tough one, because it's not just with the kids. I see it with young adults, kids that are, I call them kids, 10 years younger than me. So they're full on in adulthood, and it's still victim mindset. And don't get me wrong, there's victims out there. People have faced atrocities, and that stuff. I'm one of them, I have these conversations with younger athletes, for example. This is kind of my example is, athletes will tell me all the time, like, oh, I can't believe so-and-so got that sponsorship. I should have got that. Or, I got to start making money at this, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whoa, what's your goal here? Is it to get sponsored and make money? Or is your goal to be great at something? And if your goal is to get sponsored and make money, you might be doing it for the wrong reason, right? You need to take accountability and ownership of your work ethic first and foremost. And you should be doing it because you love it, not because, there's a medal on the line or there's money on the line. Like, yeah, that's a perk of our job, of my job. But, the process is really what's important. And, it's a little cliche, but it's so true. Like, fall in love with the process, and failure, you'll have success with failure. And it's funny because I'm like, oh, well, it's easy for you to say you've made it. And I'm like, made what? Made something of myself? Sure. Made it out of like a ghetto situation where, we were homeless. My mom was on drugs, and, all the crazy atrocities. Sure. Yeah, I did that. But that also wasn't like, I'm not a victim. I don't consider myself a victim. And I've told my story over and over and done a lot of public speaking and all of that. And one thing that I really am working on fine tuning and kind of redefining my story is like, I'm not a victim. And I don't want people to think that about me and think that's the way I see it. I am so lucky that I had such a terrible childhood, because that actually showed me where I never want to be in life. And that gave me a great work ethic, and it taught me to chase things, to fail, learn from those failures, and succeed. But when these kids tell me, oh, well, it's easy for you to say you've made it, I'm like, I've made a career out of failing. Like, I don't win every race. I'm not, I don't make a ton of money at what I do. I'm a hustler, like in the sense of like, I'm always down to do an odd job to pick up $100 or something, or $50, or like, that's where it is the work ethic. It's not, I don't feel like and here's another thing. The world doesn't owe you shit. Most people don't realize this, especially the younger generation. They all want it now. They all see these millionaires, billionaires on social media. They don't realize, like, first of all, the world doesn't owe you a damn thing. The only guarantee is you don't make it out alive. Okay? These millionaires and billionaires, they didn't generally make their fortune until they were in the range of like 50. Yeah, you have that odd one out there that defied the odds, that is 25 and balling because they figured out a system. But like, okay, like that is such a small percentage of the people who actually own the wealth. Like, The world doesn't owe you anything. It takes real work and effort and ethics and all that other stuff. And I'm sorry, but you have to fail. Failure is a part of success. It is the biggest part of success, in my opinion. And if you can't fail, you can't pick yourself up and learn from the mistake. Like, Becky didn't pass me the ball. Okay, get your ass down the field and take it from her. I don't know. Like, I don't play soccer. I don't know if that's right or not, but like, there's gotta be a lesson to learn here. Right. And like, oh my God, I get fired up about this because I deal with a lot of young athletes, both on my team, coming up through the ranks, coaching, all of this. And you know what? You got to fail. I've failed way more times than I've succeeded in my sport and in life. You know, like, life is all about a series of failures, and you've got to turn those into small successes, you know, and also chase what's actually important about something, not money and stuff. Because if you're like, oh, I should have got that sponsorship. Why did that person? Why? First of all, why should you have gotten it over that other person? First of all, what do you bring to the table? 2, and 3, what are they doing different than you? Because at the end of the day, that company, that brand, whatever, found something more valuable in that person. And if you can figure that piece out and kind of emulate your process around it, and like, okay, this is what they're doing different, maybe I can try that, versus being like, screw that, I don't believe in that. Whoa.
Exactly.
Like,
exactly.
oh my God.
Exactly.
Dude. I'm so sorry. This fires me up though.
You're good. You got to go out there and get it. You got to go out there and get it, man. I didn't have the drive I have now until I joined the military. Really, I coasted a lot through high school. I love sports and everything like that. But from a work ethic, from a grades perspective, from a sitting down and doing the work, sports were different, but from a sitting down and doing the work perspective, I didn't have that till after I was in the military. The military kind of, something snapped in my head that, hey, like, we got to get this done, and we got to get this done now, because lives are on the line, you know, whatever it was. That's what it was. Being a victim is a choice a lot of the time, not always. As you said, there are victims out there in the world, and the things that happen to them are absolutely horrible. But in a lot of sense, being a victim is a choice, and learning how to instill that in our kids is going to be vital to kind of their success growing up. That victim's mentality will lead into depression as an adult. It'll lead into just stuff that you don't even want to think about. So being able to get by that's going to be critical, and it's going to be fun, man. We'll get there. We'll get there for sure.
Well, I think it's important for the kiddos and just everyone to understand, like, yes, you're going to have trials and tribulations. You're going to have atrocities. You're going to have hard times. But do you want to be a victim of that? The only time you become a victim is when you let that stop you, when you let that change your mindset. Why don't you be the hero of your own story? Don't be a victim of your story. Be the hero of your own story. And you know what? We were talking about some stuff the other night, and I'm going to say it again. Just because you feel a certain way does not make it fact. Feelings are not fact. And that's something I've learned from, like, deep diving into myself, working on my own stuff, you know, yoga, meditation, all of that. Something that kind of has been taught to me is just because you feel a certain way doesn't make it fact. Look at the facts and chase it, you know?
I think you and I both talked. We're both emotional people. You know, obviously me a little bit earlier in this podcast, I'm a very emotional person. So sometimes my emotions take over situations. Maybe it's a sporting event. Maybe I think some guy tripped me and I get up in his face because, you know, what the heck, dude, you know, but you know, maybe I tripped over the ball. Maybe something happened that I let my emotions get the best of me because we were getting smoked in this game, or some dude just beat me real bad. And now you trip me and now my emotions are into it. So I definitely am I almost said I'm victim to that. I fall into that category sometimes where my feelings take over. And that's what's important about taking a step back. Maybe you get an email at work and the email really sets you off. It really triggers something in you that's like, no, you're wrong, I'm right. Is it a good idea to blast an email right back at them, kind of punking them?
No.
You know, it isn't, because your feelings are taking over there, and you know, the ramifications of that could be greater than you want them to be. So sitting back, taking a breath, going for a walk, going for a run, maybe sitting on it overnight, and then reassessing in the morning and responding to that email. Man, we are all human. We are all human. We all make mistakes. It is what it is. And, we got one life to live. So let's figure out a way to live it right.
Yeah, I love it, man. What do you think? End on that note?
I think we should, but I want to make one more plug real quick. And it's a similar plug. And it's a similar plug that you made earlier when you mentioned Jocko and the kids' books. There's another great book that Jocko has, and it's regarding personal ownership, and it's called Extreme Ownership. And it really dives deep into owning everything. What could you do differently, after the fact? If there's a failure at some point, you lost your job, own it, or you didn't get that promotion, own it. What can you do differently? It's very similar to what you were said about the athletes and the sponsorship, extreme ownership. Check out that book if you get a chance. That was definitely a good one that resonated with me a lot. Probably a little too adult for my daughter to read right now, but it's definitely a good one.
Dude, I got a drive ahead of me. I might download it, and if it's on audiobook, and listen to it. I'm all about audiobooks, and because I don't have the most time in the world to just sit down and read. But I love Jocko. I love his message. Anybody who really promotes that like ownership aspect of life, and just understand that failure is a part of the process mindset, and if you make a mistake, own up to it. It's something that I actually had to talk to my son about yesterday. Who knows, maybe it'll help me pass that message along to him and other folks alike, and maybe it'll help me take more ownership of my own stuff as well. You're, like I said, you're only a victim to something if you allow it to control you. You can always take ownership of where you made mistakes, where you can improve, and you can be the hero of your own story. And that's my big message to the world is don't be a victim, be the hero.
I love it, man. I love it. Thank you very much, Keith. This was a great one. For everybody listening, go out and follow us. We're on Instagram. We're on Twitter. We're on, I guess not Twitter anymore. It's X now. Follow our podcast on Spotify, on Amazon Music, on Apple Music. We're on YouTube under Shredding Sassy. We're really lucky and fortunate to have Shredding Sassy backing us in this effort. If you like what we're doing, again, follow us. I will be out in Lake Tahoe, California in April for 17, 18, 19, and 20. We're going to have a pretty cool event out there. It's called Shred Fest. We got a skate event, we got an art party, and then we have a snowboard event. So if you're in the area and you want to meet up with some like-minded shredders, please hit me up and we'll make it work. Sleep,
where is each section of the events happening? I mean, I know you said Lake Tahoe, but do you have specifics?
Yeah, absolutely. So the skate event and the art party that are going to be held on the 19th will be in Auburn, California. So just west down 80 from North Lake Tahoe in Auburn, California will be there. And then the On Hill Shred Fest event will be at Kingvale Mountain Resort. Again, just right there off of 80. We're really excited to get out there with the community, the Shredding Sassy community, the action sports community, the Web3 community, and have a good time. Share some drinks, share some love, and share some stoke together. So, man, this has been a fun one, Keith. This has been a fun one. Thanks for doing this with me. I hope we get to do more of these in the future. I know we like to do interviews and bring on top athletes, but it's fun to get deep and kind of talk about some of our experiences in our lives as well.
Yeah, man. Thank you for obviously your time. I know you're super busy. Thank you for the topics. I love talking about just real stuff every day. And thank you for your vulnerability and your openness to talk about your life, man. Really appreciate you, bro.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But with that, let's close it down, and I'll see you out there, guys.
Have a great one, everyone.
You.